Good evening. Welcome to our Gita session this evening. So happy that you're with me, and we're continuing our sojourn through the fifth chapter of Bhagavad Gita. So I hope everybody is doing well. Jai Krishna, Shri Hari. I hope you're all doing well, and you're going to have a totally blissful, healthy, fully spiritual year, this 2026. So let us begin. With your permission, with your kind permission, we will begin with our journey here. We're on text 25, chapter 5, text 25. Chapter is entitled Karma Yoga, Action in Krishna Consciousness. Okay. So, as we normally begin our sessions with some Sanskrit to put ourselves in the mood of the dialogue of Krishna and Arjuna over 5,000 years ago on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, let us read text 25. Labhante Brahma Nirvanam Rishaya China Kalmasaha China Dvaidha Yatatmanaha Sarvabhuta Hite Rataha. Those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, whose minds are engaged within, who are always busy working for the welfare of all living beings, and who are free from all sins, achieve liberation in the Supreme. So, one of the themes, or one of the topics that Krishna brings up repeatedly throughout the Bhagavad Gita, the end of the second chapter, Krishna talks about what is a transcendentalist. Here in the fifth chapter, Krishna is, because there's different degrees of transcendental, in other words, different levels of advancement that Krishna addresses. And this is a very, very important point. Thus, it deserves repetition so that we can understand. In the fourth chapter, Krishna says, just try to learn the truth from a spiritual teacher and render service and be submissive and the self-realized soul, because they have seen the truth, they can impart the truth. So Krishna, that's a very important verse. And therefore, Krishna identifies the actual indicators of advancement. First, he talks about the sadhaka. The sadhaka is one who is practicing, and thus on their path of practice, they're purifying the heart and they're making advancement. And then Krishna is talking about here. What does he say in this verse? Those who are beyond. So it goes from a person who is practicing, and thus by virtue of their practice, they're developing different levels of advancement. And then Krishna is now talking about those who are on the path and who are achieving liberation. So those who are achieving liberation, they also they have indicators or their symptoms. And it's very important to understand symptoms of an advanced personality, a teacher, because we've been around the block, and both in the material world and in our spiritual journey. And, we know that there are people who pretend to be teachers, people who strike the pose as a teacher, but, they themselves may have a hard time practicing what they preach. So therefore, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he gives us indicators, symptoms of advancement. And as I said, the purpose of that is twofold. Number one is so that we can recognize a teacher. And when we have that good fortune, we take advantage of that association or that sangha. It's described that the sangha of advanced personalities are one of the main components, particularly of the Bhakti Yoga system, and in other systems also. Having association with advanced personalities is very, very important. And as I said, to understand that person, because even great personalities in the history of the Vedas have misunderstood or not recognized or identified a great personality. It's the story of Jad Bharat, for instance. Jad Bharat appeared to be a deaf and dumb, wandering, almost homeless person, not considered very educated, not considered very advanced, but yet he was a self-realized soul. He didn't reveal it to everyone until he met King Rahugana, and King Rahugana he actually became enslaved to King Rahugana and became one of his palanquin bearers. And so when Jad Bharat was holding up one of the ends, there were four palanquin bearers, and he was holding up one of the ends of the palanquin of the king. And he wasn't doing a very good job because he was trying to avoid stepping on ants. He did not want to unnecessarily harm other living entities. So every time he was moving one way or another to try to avoid stepping on ants, it was rocking the palanquin. If you know what a palanquin is, basically it's two long poles and there's a seat. Depending on the royalty, the level of royalty, it could be very, very ornate or it could be very simple. So the palanquin was rocking back and forth, and King Rahugana, very disturbed, looked at what's going on. Who's doing that? And when he identified Jad Bharat as the one who was doing that, he started chastising him and calling him all kinds of names and denigrating him, et cetera, et cetera. Eventually, it led into a discussion about the science of self-realization. And King Rahugana, who was a nobleman and who was highly educated, specifically in the Vedic arts and sciences of spirituality, he began to recognize that this personality was not an ordinary personality, and he totally did not understand who he was until Jad Bharat began to speak. So this is the importance of recognizing, and that's why Krishna, in the second chapter, in the fifth chapter, and subsequent chapters, he identifies the qualities of a practicing yogi, sadhaka, then one who has achieved a level of liberation, and then he talks about the topmost level of understanding, and that's engaging in pure devotion to the Supreme. That's called pure bhakti. So here, those who are beyond the dualities that arise from doubts. Okay, so how do we go beyond doubt? Doubt is usually created by lack of knowledge, and doubt is eradicated or dismissed by virtue of knowledge, especially according to the Bhakti Yoga path, that avidya means no knowledge, and avidya leads to ignorance. And ignorance means to ignore the universal truth, the universal points, universal wisdom that has been given to humanity so that they can use the human form of life to cultivate a deep understanding of the purpose of humanity. So beyond the dualities that arise from doubts, um, whose minds are engaged within, that means pratyahara. Pratyahara means the ability to control the senses and the mind. And then rather than always having the senses and the mind go out, project out to the objects of senses, one, by virtue of controlling the mind, can bring the mind within. It starts with control of breath. By controlling the breath, everything begins to settle down when one harmonizes with their breath. And these are some of the preliminary techniques in order to bring the mind under control. But when one brings the mind under control, then can draw the mind and the senses within and begin to understand the true nature of the self. That's what self-realization means, is to be able to be aware of your awareness as who you really are, not thought, not sense perception, none of those things. Excuse me. In the middle of class, I'm in the middle of class, sweetheart. Hello. So sorry for that interruption. My wife's in India, and I guess she's not calculating the time properly. So this way, we able to draw the mind within and thus begin to realize or identify the distinction between the machine and the operator of the machine. Yantra Rudani Maya, Krishna says later on in the Bhagavad Gita, that it's a machine made of material energy. So to understand awareness as the self, to understand the senses and their interactions is the operation of the machine, to understand that there is a purification that is going on within the heart as a result of practice. And there's a nice story about this, in terms of mind and sense control and the result of that. There was a Buddhist monk who was well known. He was a well known a Buddhist monk. He was a realized personality, and he was able to control the senses, do meditation, teach meditation. So it came to the understanding of these residents of the village called Sundara in northern India that this monk was going to visit them. So they were very excited because having his association was, a great honor. There was a young girl who lived in this village of Sundara. Her name was Mala. And Mala was a fiery, she was a firecracker. She had a tendency to have anger, not control her anger, etc. So she's a bit of a firecracker and a bit of a skeptic. So when she heard that this monk was coming, she was curious, but very skeptical about, what this monk is and what he can do. So the monk comes into the village. He's very simple. He's very humble. He resides under a banyan tree. So while he's residing under the banyan tree, he immediately begins to sweep the leaves. So Mala comes, she finds out where he's staying, and she sees him sweeping the leaves. And she says to the monk, why are you doing that? Every day the tree is going to shed its leaves. What is the purpose of that? And the monk looks at her, very humbly, and he smiles. He said, it is not to finish, but it is to practice. And she said, practice? What do you mean? So when she asked, why are you sweeping? And he said, it's to practice. And then she says, practice what? What are you practicing by sweeping these leaves? And he says, practice stilling the mind, cleansing the mind and stilling the mind. Well, even though she was skeptical and even though she has a tendency to be angry, that resonated. So the monk in the subsequent days gave class underneath this banyan tree. And many of the village people of the village Sundar attended his class. And Mala was one who was attending the class. And some of the points that he was raising in the class was anger as a flame that burns the hand that holds it. So he was teaching about anger and the devastating effects that anger can have, especially on consciousness. He also taught about generosity as a gate that opens the heart. And there are now, even though this has been part of the yoga tradition, Buddhist yoga, Hindu yoga, the yoga tradition is a heart of generosity, a heart of kindness. So he was teaching that the heart, a generosity as a gate that opens the heart. And then the other point was awareness as the lamp inside every person. So Mala was thinking about these points, she was thinking about anger because she had that as an issue, and at least she was open enough and honest enough to recognize that was her issue. And then she said, anger as a flame that burns the hand that holds it. So I'm actually burning myself. I'm hurting myself with my anger. I'm not intimidating. I'm not bullying, etc. I'm actually hurting myself by virtue of allowing this anger to overwhelm me. And Krishna will later he'll later pinpoint what are the detrimental effects of lust, anger, and greed, and how it deters our advancement and our understanding of the principles of yoga. So she was very impressed by his teachings. And she says, I related to your teaching. She said, but if my mind is a lamp, it seems to be it's filled with smoke. So the Buddhist monk, he smiled and he said, so let us clean it together. And therefore he took her on as a student. And he taught her very simple principles, how to breathe when anger arises, how to observe your thoughts rather than get lost or consumed by your thoughts, and how to observe those thoughts without being pulled by them, how to replace complaint with compassion, how to cultivate gratitude with each sunrise, how to hear the sacred sounds that enrich and purify and advance the heart. So he taught her this very simple principles, and she was affected by his teachings. Her heart softened and transformation took place. That transformation was profound, and she imbibed those practices, assimilated them into her life, and people began to notice the transformation. And as a result of her transformation, people in the village started approaching her and seeking out, knowledge, wisdom from her about the cultivation of controlling the mind. So Krishna is talking about that principle. In the previous verse, he says, one whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the supreme and ultimately attains the supreme. I backstepped a bit. That was 24, just to keep us in the flow of what Krishna is saying here. 26, those who are free from anger. So thus the story of the monk and Mala, free from anger and all material desires, who are self-realized, self-disciplined, and constantly endeavoring for perfection, are assured of liberation in the Supreme in the very near future. Krishna also says that in the second chapter. He says, Matra svarshastu kontya sitoshna sukha dukkha agama payano nichas tung titikshashva bharata. And Krishna says there, tolerance is an important component in terms of self-realization. And one who is able to tolerate the dualities of life, happiness, distress, heat, cold, anger, elation, to able to sit in the middle, to sit in a equal poised position in the mind, that person is qualified for liberation. So again, Krishna is repeating this point that the word, two words is kama and krodha. Kama means desires. And you notice the order in which he is saying this. From desires comes anger. And from anger, um, then this is the saintly person, the realized person has freed himself from the shackles of anger and from the pull and the bondage of material desires. And thus, as Patanjali says in the Yoga Sutras, Yogas Chitta Britti Nirodha, that when you calm the mind, you situate the mind in an equanimity or being equipoised or being stable or steady through happiness, distress, through all the dualities, then one can begin to realize and experience the happiness within. Happiness is not something that you have to travel around and seek out. It's all right to do that, and it's all right to experience that level of happiness. But one who cultivates the happiness within the heart doesn't have to go to a place to be happy, but is actually happy within. And when they go to a place, they are the type of person who is influential just by being there because of the nature of their heart. Their heart actually emanates that energy of peacefulness and tranquility and happiness, and therefore they have an influence, not even doing anything or saying anything. The influence is there. It's like when a fresh breeze blows through, like in my backyard sometimes. Yeah, I have a lot of animals back there, and then sometimes an animal will die, and of course, a dead body is it's a stench. And the only thing, of course, finding that body and disposing of it will help. But the only thing which actually gets rid of that stench is the breezes that are continually blowing through and taking that stench out of there. So, this when a self-realized soul is present in the room, our mind may be confused, our mind may be disturbed, our mind may be undergoing so many difficulties, but just by being in association, I know I have this personal experience by having the great fortune of having the association of A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and being in the room with him and in his lectures and his conversations, and seeing, and not just someone who was his disciple, and someone who's sold on him being a great spiritual personality, but I've seen him in conversations with priests, conversations with academicians, conversations with politicians, etc., and journalists, uh, um, being on TV, and seeing the effect of a heart that's tranquil on the environment. It's a very powerful experience. And just as I said, just as the cool breeze blows through the environment and cleanses it from any bad smells. So when the purity of heart and mind is in a room and has a tendency to help us, in terms of controlling, calming down, purifying our minds from any kind of difficulty that's there. This is the importance of having that kind of association. There's a nice story from the Mahabharata about Yudhisthira and the Pandavas. If you know, you're at least a little familiar with the Pandavas from the Bhagavad Gita. Um, Arjuna is one of the Pandava brothers. So after the whole Mahabharata, the whole history, the whole life journey of the five Pandava brothers, they reached the age of retirement from their position. So what they were doing in their retirement, according to the Vedas, when one and in Bhakti Yoga, when one retires, they actually give up any responsibilities, and the primary responsibility is the cultivation of the pure heart and the sharing of that process of cultivation with others. So the Pandavas reached their age of retirement, all five brothers and their wife Draupadi start on their pilgrimage towards the Himalayas. They're traveling north. And as they travel, it's a very arduous journey. They go a particular way, and one falls by the way. So the first one to fall is Draupadi. The second one to fall is Sahadev, then Nakula, then Arjuna, then Bhima. Finally, Yudhisthira arrives at the summit of the Himalayas, and there he is met by Indra, and Indra takes him to Swargaloka, which is a heavenly planet there. And all Kshatriyas, all warriors who live a life of Dharma, that is the blessing that they receive. So Yudhisthira goes there, and he's surprised to see there Duryodhan and his brothers. Now, Duryodhan and his brothers, because they lived according to the rules of the Kshatriya, the warrior, they were rewarded with that. But he did not see Draupadi, um, Sahadev, Nakula, Arjuna, and Bhima. His brothers were not there. His brothers were not rewarded with. And when he asked Indra, where are my brothers and Draupadi? And Indra says to Yudhisthira, they, unfortunately, because they made mistakes in their dharma, they went to hell, Naraka, the hell of Naraka. And Yudhisthira was like absolutely stunned. How is this possible? So Indra extends his hand. He says, come to Swarga. You were not like that, so therefore you go to Swarga. And Yudhisthira said, no, I want to be, I want to see and to be with my brothers. And so Indra says, you want to go to Naraka? You want to go to that hell? And he says, yeah. So he goes there, and he hears the sounds of suffering, and he's very very sad that his brothers and his wife Draupadi have to go through this. So when it's Indra says, no, it's time. You came down here, you saw this. Now it's time to go. And Yudhisthira is thinking about going, and then Draupadi and his brothers and the other residents of that hell said, "Oh, your very presence has relieved me of my suffering. Please don't go." So when Yudhisthira heard that, just by his presence, just by being there, again, this breeze, this fresh breeze, which is purifying and causing the environment to be tranquil. Yudhisthira tells Indra, I'm not going to Swarga. I'm going to stay here in Naraka. And then when Yudhisthira and Indra says to Yudhisthira, why are you doing that? And he said, well, if I can in any way help my brothers and the other residents of this hellish area, then I must do that. This, I am compelled to do that. So see, that is what Krishna is talking about. That one, when one is developing, cultivating their spiritual path, it is quite natural that they are kind. They're endeavoring for perfection. They and in the previous verse, Krishna says that they're always busy working for the welfare of all living entities. And that's quite a chore to take on. So Yudhisthira made that determination. I'm going to stay here. I'm helping these living entities. They're in a suffering condition. I will stay. So it ends up being an illusion created by Indra as a test of Yudhisthira and his greatness. There actually was not that. There was a place like that where the brothers were damned to. They weren't in that position. It was just a big illusion to see the reaction of Yudhisthira, and because Yudhisthira, was compassionate within his heart, so much so that he gave up going to a heavenly planet to reside in a hellish planet because others were benefiting by his association. So when Yudhisthira demonstrated that quality, Indra realized, because during the course of the Mahabharata, Yudhisthira goes through three different tests, which is another story, and this was the third test, which was proof of his being, the king of Dharma, the king of righteousness. It was proof that one who is the self-realized soul, he was truly, according to Krishna in Bhagavad Gita, a Rajarshi, a Raja Rishi. He was a king, but he was also a saintly personality because he was that saintly personality, and he passed the tests of Indra that were given to him on varying occasions. Then everyone was in Swarga Loka. And from Swarga Loka, because one may ask, well, they were not just good warriors and dharmic personalities, but they were great devotees of Krishna. And Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, if you're always thinking of me and serving me, you'll come to me. How come they didn't go to the spiritual realm? But it is described in the Mahabharata. They went to Swarga, and Swarga was a jumping point off for them to go to the spiritual world. So we see that these qualities and these characteristics are what develops and what Krishna is emphasizing again and again, in terms of the Bhagavad Gita for our benefit. Those of us that are um, sincerely seeking the path that will lead us to the place of righteousness, the place of spirituality, the place of compassion and kindness. We need guidance. This is just a plain and simple fact. We need to be directed on our path. And it is very, very helpful to know when we have the good fortune so as not to miss that opportunity. So this is really an important verse. And Krishna describes also in these two text 25 and text 30, text 26, Krishna describes, he mentions Brahma Nirvana. Now, people have heard of nirvana. Nirvana is the place of happiness and nothingness, etc., but not according to the Bhakti Yoga tradition. Nirvana, Brahma Nirvana, which is described in the text 25, Labhante Brahma Nirvanam, those who are beyond the duality and rise above doubts. From the Vaishnava perspective, Brahma means freedom. Freedom from material bondage and peace arising from realization of the Supreme. Nirvana does not mean extinction of individuality, but it means extinction of material misidentification. In other words, part of our misidentification is thinking that we are the machine made of material energy. So we have that misidentification. So Brahma Nirvana that Krishna is talking about here is we are getting rid of, or what's the word used here? Annihilate, not annihilation, but Brahma here means freedom from material bondage and peace, and extinction of material misidentification and extinction of the self. So this is one aspect that Krishna is talking about. We get rid of the ego. What is causing our misidentification? It's the ego, the false ego, ahankar. The word literally translated from Sanskrit means false identity, misidentification with that we are the body and we are the mind, when in fact we are the awareness, which is emanating from the eternal soul. So that when Krishna says that Brahma Nirvana, it can also mean Brahma Bhuta. That means happiness that comes from being situated on a spiritual platform. It's a preliminary spiritual platform. It's where we start to become free from material miseries. There's three miseries that are described in the Bhagavad Gita. Miseries that are caused from the mind and the body. That's called Adhyatmika. Miseries which are caused by other living entities. Bhautika. That means like you get bit by a mosquito, like was it last night or the night before? Some bug bit me at night, and now I've got like two big welts. I don't know if it was a spider or some kind of potent mosquito or something. So, but it's causing me misery. Last night I was itching all night, so it's causing me misery. That's an example of misery caused by other living entities. And then the third one is adi. So it's adi atmika, atmika meaning coming from the body or the mind. Adi bhautika, miseries which are coming from other living entities, and adi daivaka, which means miseries which are coming from like natural sources. If you get caught in a hurricane or some kind of natural catastrophe, etc., those are considered daivaka, coming from a source way beyond our control. So to get rid of miseries, this is to be on this Brahma Nirvana stage or the Brahma Bhuta stage. So it's like a preliminary. Um, sometimes people think I want to do meditation, so I want to be peaceful. But peacefulness is just the preliminary stage of self-realization. It goes a lot deeper. Yeah, you can become peaceful. You can chant a mantra and do proper breathing, etc., and kind of relax the mind. But beyond all of that, uh, when you're doing your meditation, we have an ability to to control urges of the senses and the body. We can do that. We can recognize that I'm overeating. That's not good. I'm not sleeping enough. I'm sleeping too much. That's not good. And we can make those adjustments because we can kind of step back and see, the various habits that we have developed over the course of time that are impeding my progress, spiritual progress, material progress, etc. But it's much harder to deal with the mind. We're very close to the mind because we're in our mind, and part of the misidentification is thinking that our thoughts are actually our soul, and thoughts are not the soul. Awareness of the thoughts, it's a level deeper. Awareness of the thoughts is an emanation of the soul. But thoughts in and of themselves are the reaction from the senses going out and taking in data. And all this data goes into the mind and it's processed in a certain way. And we're stimulated into thoughts. In Sanskrit, it's called vrittis. And it means the mind is churning with all kinds of ideas there, memories and imagination and actual perception. There's different types of thoughts that are there. Imagination, perception, memories, all of these things, real knowledge, erroneous knowledge, all of these create this churning of the mind. So the control of the mind is a preliminary stage of the yogic process. And that is to bring us to a point when we're controlled and when we're peaceful to go even deeper, to dive in even deeper. And especially in the Bhakti Yoga tradition, that deepening of a dive is into relationship, is into spiritual relationship with the Supreme. When we are able to have that sense of control, that sense of peacefulness, and then we can apply our attention, our focus, our concentration into the nature of love and to engage in acts of devotion. In Bhakti Yoga, Bhakti literally means love and devotional service to the Supreme. Then we can do that and do it in a state of mind of connection. We act, and that action could be our bondage, can be our source of attachment, and perpetuate and continue to incite desires which lead to kama krodha. Kama means desires, krodha means anger, frustration of those desires or not fulfillment of those desires, or we do fulfill our desires and it's still not satisfying. It can lead us that way, our actions, or our actions in a connected state of mind in pursuit of our natural loving relationship with the Supreme. And that is when it goes deeper. That's how it gets deeper. So this is a piece, this Brahma Nirvanam, this Brahma Bhuta stage, this is a piece which is favorable or conducive to bhakti, which is actually the ultimate fruit that the yogi is looking. Um, yeah. So, any questions or comments? I always say a mouthful, and then if anyone wants to reflect on something and pass it back to me, we could do that. We discuss these two verses. If not, we'll move on to the next two. Everyone good? Okay. So these text 27 and 28 of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5. Shutting out all external sense objects, keeping the eyes and vision concentrated between the two eyebrows, suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils, and thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence. And if you remember the story I told about the monk, what was one of the first things that he taught Mala, the girl, the young girl? He taught her suspending the inward and outward breaths within the nostrils and thus bringing the mind under control. And that was the way she was able to deal with her impulses of anger. And thus controlling the mind, senses, and intelligence. The transcendentalist, aiming at liberation, becomes free from desire, fear, and anger. Now, why does Krishna say those three? Desire, fear, and anger. There's many different emotions that are there. There's many different impulses that we have to deal with. But according to Krishna, desire is the impulse that we have to deal with and bring under control. Because it's from desire is where anger comes. Anger comes when desire is not fulfilled or is fulfilled and does not meet expectations. And therefore, if it's not being fulfilled, I have no chance. There was a story. I remember when I was living in New Jersey, this story caught my attention. It was actually in Premarnava, it was in your area there, down there in central Jersey. This young boy, he was a high school student, 17 years old, and he came from a poor family. And he really wanted, he turned 17, and in New Jersey, that's like the coming of age. That's when you drive, you get your driver's license. I don't know if they've changed it. At least when I was growing up in New Jersey at 17, you get your driver's license. So coming of age. So this boy just contemplating driving. He wanted a car and driving, and the car that he locked into um, was a Toyota Camry for some reason. So that this the contemplation, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, when you contemplate something, then and you really lock into it, you become attached to your contemplation. And from that contemplation develops attachment, and from that detachment develops intense desire to have what you are contemplating on. So unfortunately, those contemplations get corrupted by avidya, or a lack of knowledge, and thus ignorance. And so if we think that the Toyota Camry is going to make me happy, well, just wait till it breaks down for the first time. And you have to replace the transmission or something like that. Then all that goes up in smoke. All that illusion that me having a Toyota Camry. But anyway, this boy wanted the Toyota Camry, so he actually carjacked from a teacher, and he took the teacher off road somewhere, and the teacher was trying to talk him out of it, but he was so distorted by this intense desire that he thought that the only way, she was saying to him, you're going to get caught, you're going to go to jail, you're such a young, nice boy. So that turned into, oh, the only way I'm not going to get caught is to get rid of this lady. So he ended up killing the lady. He first he carjacked, and then his kind of thought process led him to say, well, I got to get rid of the problem, and she's the problem. So this intense desire, Krishna says, leads us to anger and frustration. Dhyayato vishayam pumsa sangasteshu bhajayate sangat sanjayate kama kroda vijayate. So here Krishna is repeating the same order. Kama kroda in this verse here, text 26. Kama kroda vimuktanam. So Krishna says kama kroda vijayate. That from the intense desire comes frustration, comes anger, from anger becomes bewilderment, from bewilderment comes loss of intelligence, from loss in intelligence, one completely gets deluded, in a total state of delusion. So this story of this young man, he just became totally deluded by the pushing or the intensity of the desire to have this particular type of car, so much so that he even committed murder, thinking that this is the way he was going to do it. Of course, fortunately, we're not at that point, but we're at a point where, I don't know about you, um, anger is a quick trigger response. Anger is not a thought. Anger is prior to thinking. It's a quick trigger response. And, it can totally corrupt, pollute, and disturb our very being. So, the ability to control our anger is of utmost importance. So Krishna says here, those are free from desire, anger, fear, because also desire can produce fear, loss of that which we have or that which we want. Um, these are all subsequent or subset emotions coming from the preliminary emotion of intense desire. So that's why Krishna puts it first, kama krodha. And those who are able to free themselves from it, they are well on their way to the path of liberation. So one who is always in this state is certainly liberated. So Krishna has mentioned in the verses that we've read so far, free from doubts. How? Through knowledge. Where do we get our knowledge? Swadhyaya, study of sacred text, hearing from self-realized soul. We get knowledge by observation, observation of our own nature. Um, Minds engaged within, learning how that pratyahara process, how to withdraw the senses and mind within, who are compassionate, the natural, we talked about the monk and the compassion, those who are developing or cultivating compassion and free from all sins. And when I don't like to put the Judeo-Christian version on that, but use the word originally from Latin rather, sin meaning making an error in judgment. So learning how to make proper judgment, free from anger, material desires, who are absorbed in the process of self-realization and self-discipline, contemplating or endeavoring for perfection, and they are assured liberation. So Krishna is saying again and again, assured liberation and free from desire, fear, and anger. One who is in this state is always liberated. So again and again, he's repeating, these attributes that you cultivate through your practice, your spiritual practice, this leads you towards the freedom that we're seeking. Text 29, this is the peace formula. A person in full consciousness of me, knowing me to be the ultimate beneficiary of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. Back in the late 60s, when there were a lot of protests against the Vietnam War, Prabhupada went to a United Nations protest. He and several of his students, they went there and they participated in that protest. And one of the things that Prabhupada said at that time in a brief lecture, but also that was handed out in a pamphlet, was called the Peace Formula. And what was the peace formula? It was this verse, because Krishna gives it as the peace formula. He says three things in the peace formula, three components to the peace formula. One is full consciousness of me and your relationship with me. That means our connection with the supreme, the divine, the supreme absolute truth, the personality, Bhagavan feature of the absolute truth. So if you are in full consciousness of me and understand me to be the beneficiary of your actions. And of course, this is, what Krishna spoke about at the end of the second chapter, almost the entirety of the third and fourth chapters, and now also in the fifth chapter, that we are able to see our actions in connection or in relationship with the Supreme as an offering. Krishna says in the third chapter that if you see in that way, if you complete the cycle of connection, it's a full cycle that from the rains come the rains nourish the seeds produce the grain is harvested and then cooked and prepared and offered back to the beginning of that cycle from whence everything comes, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So Krishna is saying here, one of the components of being in a peaceful state of mind, achieving that seriously, honestly, and in perpetuity is understanding that I'm the beneficiary. I am the recipient of your sacrifice. Because if you are the recipient of your sacrifice, it's temporary and it's ultimately not going to have total fulfillment, which will make one santosh, content, or shanti, totally peaceful. Because there will always be disruptions in that. So, seeing me as the ultimate beneficiary of that. Krishna is saying, if you see me as the beneficiary, Krishna, then that's step one. Step two, what does he say? You don't own anything. You come into the world naked, you leave the world naked. You may be custodian of your body, your family, many different things in the course of your life. You may, be in charge of assisting your children through their life and helping them to cultivate self-awareness and helping your wife and your wife helping her husband. But in actuality, you know, everything we are doing as an offering. So that second point is that everything belongs to me. I'm Bhoktaram Jagnatapasam. I'm the recipient of sacrifices. Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. Sarva means all. Loka means places or planets. I am the owner or the controller or the source of everything. So just simply recognizing that I'm just a custodian, that there may be some temporary stewardship of what I have, but in actuality, I come in this world naked. I leave this world naked. And that is to help develop detachment, not to give up our actions. This is not what Krishna is saying. And he's making this very clear. He's really trying to make it clear to us that he's not telling us to give up. It's just to change consciousness, how we see things in relation, how we see ourselves in relationship to the world and to humanity and all living entities, not as the controller or the owner or the possessor, but in unity, in harmony with this world and all the living entities of this world. And the unifying and harmonizing factor is, Krishna is saying here, Sarva Loka Maheshwaram. I am the source of everything. And if you just recognize that simple principle and demonstrate your understanding of that principle by you're not giving up eating, you just, before you eat what you have prepared, you just offer in gratitude. Everything can be done like that, not doing what you need to do, but doing it with a consciousness that is connected through the medium of gratitude and understanding to the Supreme and all the blessings that have been showered upon me. And that is another component of the peace formula. And the third component of the peace formula is Suridam Sarva Bhutanam. That means I am the best, Krishna is saying, I'm the best friend of all living entities. And that is because I am always with you. As Paramatma, a super soul within the heart, I am with you through the entirety of your life. From when the sperm pierces the covering of the ovum and starts the whole chemistry, the whole process of body production. From that time, Krishna enters within the heart of the living entity, the being of the living entity, and is there. And then Krishna says, I'm there prior to you taking birth, when you are in another particular form, your actual birth now, I'm there in your heart as Paramatma, and I will be there at the time of death. That's why in the eighth chapter, Krishna says, just think of me, remember me, and you will come to me. You won't have to repeat the cycle of birth and growth and development and old age and disease and ultimately death. You won't go through those cycles again. That you can become liberated, free in your emancipated state of pure spirit soul, in loving devotion to the Supreme. You can be with me in that way. So Krishna says if you recognize these 3 points in this particular verse, then Gyatvyamam Shantim Richchati. Then you will experience peace. So this is the peace formula. And this is the end of the chapter. What time is it? Oh, wow. Perfect timing, 8 o'clock. So we'll continue next Tuesday, chapter 6. Chapter 6 is a lot of what Patanjali gets philosophically comes from the chapter 6. It's the Dhyana Yoga section of the Bhagavad Gita where Krishna talks about the nature of the mind and how to control the mind. And if you don't control the mind, it's your worst enemy. If you do control the mind, it's your best friend. So we'll continue that next week with chapter 6, text 1. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Uh, Josh, do you have a question or comment?
I knew you were going to ask me this tonight. I don't. I don't have any question.
Okay.
Everything you shared from last week and this week definitely deeply resonates in my life.
I'm happy for that.
Yeah, yeah. So it's very insightful and also challenges my spirit of devotion and of I guess in a sense my dharma, what I feel I'm
I
being
just I just I just
open.
read I just read about Dharma. Dharma means what you don't want for now, because oftentimes people ask me that for now,
Mhm.
because it's not as clear as what Dharma means. What you don't want to happen to yourself, that's the way you act. In other
What
words,
you
if you don't want people lying to you, right? You don't feel good when people lie to you. You don't feel good if people steal from you. There's you
right?
don't feel good if people treat you badly. That's the Dharma. That's the universal principles of Dharma that that we can
So
act by.
right. Um, so doing the things that you wouldn't want be done to yourself. Is that what you're saying?
Yes,
Right. Right.
that's what I'm saying.
Very
You know,
simple. Yeah. I also
simple
thought
and natural.
simple and natural. Yeah. I also thought it meant, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. It meant living out your soul purpose. Is that part
Mhm.
of it? I
Yeah,
guess. Yeah.
purpose is an important component of stable life, and a stable journey. Having that purpose. I was having a conversation with a yoga teacher friend of mine today, and wonderful lady, and we were talking about actually the nature of commitment
Hmm.
because I was finding, I was telling her in my experience, I've been in and around the yoga world for many years, and I've found that one of the things I see that serve as an impediment to significant advancement on one's spiritual path is commitment,
Yeah.
the inability to commit. And in the name of, oh, I'll take a little from here, I'll take a little from there, etc. But there are universal principles, like you said, you know, what we talked about these last 2 weeks had some impact on your life. And you and I are obviously different people, right? We're unique beings in and of ourselves, but yet it impacts you. It impacts me. It impacts Sri Hari in the way it needs to impact him. It impacts David in the way that it needs to impact him. It's very dynamic. It impacts Mukti and Premarnava, and all anybody who has done a dive into the Gita feels like it's speaking to them.
Right. Exactly.
Even with all of our uniqueness, you know, our difference of age, maybe our difference in culture, maybe, you know, all the differences and the uniqueness that my son was just writing a little essay on what makes him unique. And, you know, he was saying, well, you know, I like art. And he's in an art school. And I said, yeah, but there's 1,100 other students in your school that also like art. So how does that make you unique? And he says, oh, okay, I like soccer. And I really am into soccer. I said, okay, how many thousands, hundreds of thousands of kids like soccer? So I'm asking you the question, how does that make you unique? And then, you know, he was going on to all the things he was, I said, yeah. I said, but there's other things there. Start thinking
Mm.
of what is unique. Unique means only you
Mm-hmm.
possess it. And what is that? So then he said, okay, I guess I got to go back to the drawing board. so, so he spent another 2 hours on the essay. I haven't read what he came up with, but I'd be interested to find that out. But you know, I really appreciate the fact that you said, you know, had some impact on you because it does. And that's, you know, that's why I really relish meditating on the Bhagavad Gita, and particularly in association with like-minded individuals. You know, I don't consider myself, you know, ahead or behind anybody. I just feel like, you know, we're together. We're on our journey. We're on our path, and we're seeking out answers together. And that's just a wonderful, wonderful, you know, thing to experience. I feel very blessed that I have you all with me these Tuesday evenings, and we can share whatever that we can share. Does anyone else? David, good to see you. David was my first martial arts teacher, Wing Chun Kung Fu,
Mm.
way back in the 80s. He himself is a 55-year practitioner of the Chinese martial arts. Um, and we've been going to the temple together at least since the 80s, right?
Yeah,
I don't know if it was before that, but it was certainly the
that's
early 80s.
yeah.
So thank you, David, for
Oh,
taking the time and being with us.
absolutely. Yeah, today was like my late day, but I made sure that I could get in here, get some of this
Wonderful.
nectar. Really, I need it. And yeah, I always enjoy your articulation of the scriptures. It's
Thank you.
beautiful. Yeah, yeah. It's very interesting when you talking, I was thinking about, other stages, Sambandha, Abhideva.
Mhm.
And things that it's a constant realization, and also it reminds me to be on guard. We talk about the mind, yeah, how it just when you think you're doing, then because with digital, the media and everything, all this stuff's going on, it really takes you in other places, and more, so I've had to make just a greater resolve, how I start my day, and chat more and be involved and so absorbed. So I look for this nectar, so I appreciate you so much.
Well, I'm going to throw this at you. You're a martial artist, right?
Yes,
And you know through years of practice, you know there things that you in your practice in the cultivation of the martial arts, there's knowledge that you acquire, and then that knowledge becomes internalized, and it becomes, rather than conscious competence, which is knowledge, it becomes unconscious competence.
sir.
Then it becomes you, it becomes part of you. So it's that you don't have to think of a particular block. It just happens.
Yes, sir.
You know, we were just having, I was having a conversation with my son.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but he's a yellow belt in jujitsu,
Yeah, I've
and
been keeping track.
yeah, and he's pretty good. And I was talking to him about this, there's a point where you got to get off the mind, like
Yes.
thinking of what you're going to do.
Yes.
And I said that only comes from practice, where then it begins to flow. So our practice of our sadhana is, it's not like, oh, I got to chant my japa today,
Hmm.
and then you're thinking it, but it actually becomes an internal manifestation, that it's what you do. It's the
Yes.
sound vibration that you must vibrate,
Hmm.
in order for completion.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. Yeah. And,
so we have to become unconsciously competent in the practice of our sadhana.
you said it well. Yeah. And it's like layers, because you immerse yourself more and more. And that's a whole new world, and because it's very interesting. Like even in the mornings, I'm so used to chanting that even before I wake up, I'm consciously going, hey, it's like going on, and I'm going, wow, what is this? Like so it's nice experiencing. But yeah,
It is when it starts to go to those levels.
yeah,
It's very rewarding.
yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Mukti Prabhu, you,
Hey.
you want to share anything with us? Mukti is my god brother and partner in crime for many years on the and our path of bhakti. Would you like to share or say anything? What do we have? I think,
Oh,
David, you have to mute yourself, David.
okay. Let me myself. I'm sorry. Excuse
Can
me.
you hear me now? No,
There
that's
you know. We got you.
you got me?
Yep.
Well, I'm just always thankful, of course, to be in the Sangha and you bring such light to it also. And I can never be thankful enough for that. And to know, as you were saying, that there's others on this path and we're being confronted with consciousness, and it's a very curious confrontation, and to know that other people are also looking into that consciousness and choosing, I was thinking about uniqueness before that, uniqueness maybe for me is the level of surrender compared to someone else perhaps, or what else is going on. Just a thought, what degree of surrender I'm going through, or anybody else. It can do
Yeah,
it.
and how that looks. It's not only uniqueness means, how does your surrender look? The important thing is, you're honest, and you're doing it to the best of your ability. And it may look different because of you being who you are. We just can't pigeonhole everybody. We all have to realize that part of the unique manifestation is it's going to look maybe different. My approach to the Supreme, my path, my practice is going to look a little different, and that's okay. Because Krishna is within the heart, is Paramatma. And Prabhupada uses the analogy, just as you stand by standing next to a rose, you can absorb its fragrance. So Krishna, just by sitting next to us, he understands our mind. He understands our intention. And that's really, and that's only between ourselves and Krishna, you know, his ability to understand our intention,
Yeah.
and once we realize that, we realize there's no room for anything else other than my honest approach to please Krishna, and whatever that looks like.
So I'm very thankful to be on the path with my fellow Vaishnavas. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for being with us and sharing with us. Premarnava, you have anything you like to say? No? Sri Hari? Would you like to say anything?
I was looking for the button over here. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah. I
Hey,
like the
you sound like me.
I like I like the point about that you say that. Hold on, let me move this on. I like the point of how we can become fixated in something in this this mentality like blind us, like the example of the kid who how do you call
I
the
mean,
kid who stole the car of a teacher, and the teacher was trying to um, the we get like conditioned by the mentality.
yeah, by the conditioning, we're just locked and loaded. We can't see any way out of it. See, that's why the cultivation of our intelligence, purified intelligence, because the intelligence can be stronger. And therefore, it's the intelligence is the discriminating factor that keeps us on the straight and narrow path. But like in this kid's in his circumstance, there was no intelligence there. He was completely covered over by the intensity of his desire to enjoy what he felt would give him his enjoyment. And
Yeah.
that may be a very kind of perverted look, but we bring it down to our level and we continue. My wife was just telling me the other day, and she's in India right now, but before she left, she just said, because she's a doctor, Ayurvedic doctor, regular medical doctor, etc. And she's always giving advice about how to stay healthy. And she was just confiding in me. She said, I cannot believe that people I tell them if you continue to do this, it's not gonna help your health. It's gonna exacerbate your condition. And she said, I'm always shocked when they say, well, I'd rather continue coughing than give up smoking. And and she says they say things like that all the time, and she can never understand. And I just said, now you have a good understanding of the modes of material nature. Because if someone is influenced by tamagun, ignorance, ignorance means to ignore. So if someone is telling you in a position of knowledge, hey, if you continue with this habit, it's really going to cause your health to go down, not up. You're not going to, like one time a woman came to her, I have insomnia, doctor. Give me some pills. And she said, well, wait a minute. Well, what time do you go to bed? And she said, oh, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning. Do you watch TV before you go to bed? Oh, yes, I religiously watch TV. Do you drink coffee before you go to bed? Yes, yes, I do. I like to have a nice cup. I drink coffee all day, actually. I like to have a nice cup of coffee. Okay. Do you eat after 5 or 6 o'clock in the evening? Yeah, yeah, I have my meal around 8 or 9 o'clock in the evening. So my wife says, you don't need pills. You need to change your lifestyle. And the answer was, I'm not going to change my lifestyle. That's it. So she'd rather put pills in her body, which ultimately is going to affect the liver and cause other kinds of disturbance, than to say, okay, yeah, it makes sense. There's a lot of research about, the blue light coming in at you late at night, and eating late at night, and drinking coffee and going to bed late. They say that the hours between 8 and 12, those 4 hours are so enriching that's all you really need. If you go to bed at 8 and you rise at midnight, and you get really 4 good hours of sleep, it's better than going to bed at 12 and getting up at 8 hours, getting twice as much sleep. So, I mean, there's, and science in their infinite wisdom, they're lagging behind the Vedas, but they're substantiating these claims, But when the intelligence is covered by Rajagun and Tamagun, or passion and ignorance, it's incapable of making the right choice. And that's why Krishna says giving up sin. Giving up sin means making the right choice in your life in relationship to you, the soul, and the Supreme Soul. But yet, here we are, we continue to do things that are ultimately. That's why Rupa Goswami says in the Nectar of Instruction, 6 things which are beneficial to your practice of bhakti and 6 things which are detrimental to your practice of bhakti. They lay the great sages of the past lay it all out for us, and through the practice of our sadhana, it helps to free the intelligence and strengthen the intelligence to stand up to the whims of the mind and the senses when it is causing us, to not progress but regress, not only spiritually but even materially in terms of our health, etc. I went to the doctor. I thought it would be unique because I was old enough now to go to a geriatric physician. And I said, "Oh, well, I'm old enough now to be considered a geriatric." So I went to the doctor, and then had a physical and all that. And I went home. And about 2 hours later, I get a call from his office, and it's the nurse. And she says, "Mr. Puglisi, we seem to have lost your medication list. It's not in your files here." And I said to her, "What medication list? I'm on no medications." She said, "You're on no medications? You're 75 years old, you're on no medication?" "No, no medications." "Oh, what about supplements?" "No, I'm not really on any supplement. I mean, my wife twists my arm to take this and that. I do that. But other than that, I don't really I'm not on a lot of supplements either." I said, "My food is my medicine. Proper sleep is my medicine. Meditation is my medicine." And she said to me, she said, you are the first that I know of in the history of this office of a geriatric patient having no medication list. She says, usually they're 8, 10, 12 medications deep. I know in my own mother's case, when I took over her because she had dementia and I had to take over, I looked at her medication list. She was on 8 different medications, and my mom was physically healthy. Her mind, she was losing her mind a little bit. And I took that list to my friend, the geriatric doctor, and he immediately cut out 6 of the 8. So this is the kind of intelligence and awareness that we have to have, of our situation. This will help us to progress. Okay, thank you so much. This was the men's night out, I see. Thank you all for being here, and I hope to see you next week, same time, same station, next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Until that time, you all have a happy, healthy, and holy week. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Jai
Hare Krishna. Jai Jai.